For my research project, I chose to focus on comedy and hip hop cinema. Comedy and hip hop are not often paired together when discussing film genres, but when they collide, something truly remarkable happens. An amazing example of this is the film One of Them Days. The film follows two friends and roommates, Drew, a waitress played by Kiki Palmer, and Alyssa, an artist played by SZA. After finding out Alyssa's boyfriend Keyshawn blew their rent money and retreated to Bernice's house, the woman he had been cheating with, Drew and Alyssa have to scramble to make 1,500 by the end of the day, all while not being tracked down by Bernice, who is actively trying to attack them. Throughout the film, every small inconvenience turns into a full catastrophe that the film blends with sound, music, and pace. The movie itself is a comedy filled with chaotic, stressful, funny, and painfully relatable elements, but buried beneath all the jokes is a deep engagement with the aesthetics of hip hop cinema. The film uses music, sound design, and pacing not only to set up humor, but also to express the cultural and emotional stakes of the character's world. The film isn't just funny, it sounds funny, and the sound is what makes the comedy work. But before we go any further into talking specifically about the movie, we need to know the lenses we'll be using to look at the movie. One of the aspects I looked at was hip hop cinema. Hip hop cinema has always been tied to working class black life, urban soundscapes, and stories of pressure, survival, and identity. It shows the everyday struggles people go through and takes the environment around them, including city noises and the music into account as well. The genre blends cultural tension with expressive sound to turn people's everyday pressures into rhythm to help tell the story. Scholars like Regina Bradley explain that hip hop cinema is a space for expressing the messiness of the generational angst about race, class, and identity through both music and visual style. Smith Shomade adds that black women in these films transform the gangster genre, shifting how these stories get told. McJury also focuses on everyday pressure, writing that black urban comedies show how humor comes from working class stress, money problems, and daily struggles. Together, these ideas show that hip hop cinema isn't just about music or style, it's a cultural mode that expresses the realities of Black life through sound, pacing, aesthetics, and narrative tone. The other aspect I looked at was comedy. I learned that in most comedy films, they use timing, silence, sensory exaggeration, and specific techniques to land jokes. These techniques create contrast and heighten humor, making stress or chaos feel funny rather than overwhelming. A lot of humor happens when something breaks the rhythm the audience thought they were in. Sound is one of the biggest tools for that. A loud beat drop, an awkward silence, or a sudden cut can instantly turn a stressful moment into a funny one. Comedy exaggerates emotion and pacing so the audience feels a shift. In One of Them Days, a lot of the comedy literally comes from the sound itself. Evans and Hayward in Sounding Funny, Sounding Comedy Cinema explain that music and sound are essential to the success of comedy on film. They argue that comedy relies on incongruity, which is a technique I'll explain later. Deville and Malkson add that music can set up a joke and then be interrupted for comedic effect, especially in moments where sound is used to emphasize contrast. Together, these scholars show that comedy depends on timing, silence, rhythm, and sensory exaggeration. Comedy uses beat drops, sudden quiet pacing changes, and sonic shifts to land punchlines and shape audiences' reaction. Hip hop cinema has always been tied to working class black life, urban soundscapes, and stories shaped by pressure, survival, and identity. It's a genre that doesn't just show you what life looks like, it allows you to feel it through music, rhythm, and the constant noise of the city. Scholars like Regina Bradley describe hip hop cinema as a space for expressing what she calls the messiness of generational angst about race, class, and identity. That means hip hop films are often chaotic, emotional, and honest. They use both they use both music and visual style to communicate that tension to the audience. Comedy, on the other hand, relies on completely different tools: timing, silence, exaggeration, and surprise. Comedy works by breaking expectations, cutting the sound, speeding up the pace, or exaggerating a reaction so the audience get that sudden moment of contrast that feels funny. So when hip hop cinema and comedy blend, they actually fit together more naturally than you'd think. Both genres depend on rhythm, timing, and emotional intensity. Hip hop brings the pressure and energy. Comedy turns that pressure into punchlines. Together, they create a cinematic style that uses humor but still holds on to the cultural weight that defines hip hop. The two genres blend well because both use sound and pacing to shape emotion, turning the messiness of race, class, and everyday struggle into moments of humor and cinematic energy. Now that we have a grasp on how comedy and hip hop cinema blend, we need to understand a key technique used in comedy films. Incongruity is one of the core foundations of comedy that explains how humor is created when what the audience expects suddenly clashes with what actually happens. It basically means that humor happens when something unexpected interrupts what we thought was going to happen. The audience gets set up to expect a certain mood, rhythm, or outcome, and then the film suddenly breaks that pattern. The clash between expectation and surprise is what creates the laugh. In film, and especially in one of them days, incongruity often shows up through sound and music. One example of it is in this clip. In this scene, Drew and Alyssa escape Bernice's house after trying to steal their rent money back, and Bernice starts chasing them.
Come on! She me, she freaky kind of nigga, style llama, don't she cooler than a fan, but she get hotter than a summer. Take a trip out to Japan and I tsunami her vagina, wine it down a Benihana. I'm the new hip hop Madonna, I'm the new hip hop Madonna. Oh, damn!
Oh, what the fuck?
This clip is a great example of an incongruity break. Immediately after they start running, Nissan Altima by Doechii starts playing. Because it's a hip-hop track with a fast tempo and heavy rhythm, it instantly turns the chase into a stylized, almost music video-like sprint. The beat matches their panic and gives the moment a sense of intensity that feels very true to hip-hop cinema, where music often drives the emotional pace of the story. This instantly turns a chase into a rhythmic, more cinematic sprint. The song's fast tempo exactly matches their panic and creates more of a sense of urgency, capturing the audience attention. However, this scene transitions into being comedic when the music abruptly stops when Bernice runs face first into a car door. This is an obvious example of what comedy scholars call an incongruity break. These interruptions make stressful moments funny and show how the film uses sound and surprise to create comedic effect. Another and one of the most recognizable uses of hip hop aesthetics in one of them days is Bernice's musical motif. Almost every time Bernice appears, uh, the film plays this sound that immediately signals intensity.
Wait, hold on! I barely know what she looks like, I swear to God I only hit it from beyond. Oh, are you?
This is a direct echo of hip hop gangsta film tradition, where music and aggressive beats are used to mark power, danger, and heightened emotion. Smith Shomade talks about how black women in hip hop inflected films occupy spaces traditionally held by males. Bernice fits this perfectly. Her bass-heavy entrance presents her almost as an unstoppable force, and the type of character who would normally appear in a gangster film or hip-hop crime drama. The sound tells us she's a threat before she even speaks. But because the film repeats this motif so many times, it eventually becomes predictably funny. The audience starts to recognize the beat, so the tension turns into anticipation and then into humor. It blends hip-hop intensity with comedic exaggeration, using the same sound that signals danger to also signal a joke. The scene shows how one of them days uses hip hop aesthetics not just to build threat, but to twist that threat into comedy, creating a character who is both intimidating and hilarious at the same exact time. Another scene that I could not find a clip for shows Drew and Alyssa arriving at Landmark Park, hoping to sell sneakers Alyssa stole off the telephone pole. What's really important here is how the film frames the moment through a vibrant hip hop soundscape. As soon as they enter the space, Do You Have a Soul by Fushi starts playing over the shots of drummers, artists, and black vendors. The music and visuals create this lively, expressive cultural atmosphere that feels rooted in black creativity and community. This ties directly into Mukjiri's idea of the ghetto fabulous aesthetic, which he explains as the way hip hop style and energy become affirmations of working class black life. Even though Drew and Alyssa are in a desperate situation, the soundtrack and the surrounding culture transform the scene into something energetic, rich, and uplifting. The comedy comes from the contrast between that hopeful, stylish soundtrack and the chaotic reality of their struggle. To wrap everything up, One of Them Days shows how powerful the blend of hip hop cinema and comedy can be when sound is treated as the backbone of storytelling. Throughout the film, hip hop's rhythm, beats, and cultural energy create tension, urgency, and emotional depth, while comedic timing uses silence, interruptions, and unexpected shifts to break that tension and make the audience laugh. It would also be useful to explore audience reception more directly, since understanding how viewers interpret these sound cues, could add another layer to the analysis. But ultimately, One of the Days uses sound not simply as background, but as the driving force that blends genre, builds mood, and turns the pressure of daily life into something both meaningful and funny.